Hi, Faith Formation families. I just wanted to take a minute to do a quick video to talk about the season of Lent. And we are going into that season, obviously, starting on Ash Wednesday and pretty much for 40 days, right, until we get to Easter, thinking about our lives, our relationships with God. But I think that in talking with some of the families that I've talked with in the past 2 weeks, I think tongue in cheek, some of us have said, man, we've been in Lent for a whole year. This pandemic's been one great big long walk in the desert, right? And in some ways, that I think is a really accurate thought. This weekend, our priest talked about, Lent, and throughout the week have talked about Lent and talking about, in the past, it's always been, what can I give up? And, maybe what sacrifices I can make. And I think for those of us that are families right now facing a world that changes constantly, has nothing but uncertainty around every corner, sometimes we're even afraid to think that we might even return to normal on any level. Um, the thought of having to reflect on ourselves, on where we are, our relationship with God, the thought that we might have to give up more or sacrifice more is a frightening thought because we already feel broken and fragile, right? We feel like our whole world has been upside down. We're trying to juggle family, we're trying to juggle kids, we're trying to juggle school and faith formation and church and family. Sometimes we have family members in hospitals and nursing homes. We have our own health issues. We have job issues and loss of job issues. Accepting more responsibilities because positions are being eliminated. I mean, there's so many things that are changed in our world over the past year that don't even touch the surface of even how we go shopping for groceries or how we um, walk in the park, trying to make sure we're 6 feet apart. And, there's so much in our world that we are grieving because we've had such a loss over the past year that it feels like we were forced to give it up, even though we didn't necessarily want to do it for our own betterment. So, maybe a way to look at Lent this year for us is to sit with the losses, grieve the things that were taken from us, whether we voluntarily gave them up or not. And in retrospect, and moving forward, think about the ways that we can invite Jesus into that world. How can we turn those sacrifices into really valuable spiritual lessons for ourselves? I think if you're a lot like me, there's a tendency to get so overwhelmed and caught up in the moment. I'm the first to admit that I get an anxiety attack every time the school emails me something because it usually means I forgot something. Was there a Zoom call I missed? Was there a paper I didn't fill out? What did I not do now, right? And then it's trying to play catch up or hearing from our child's teacher, right? They didn't get an assignment turned in or whatever the case may be. And there's this panic of feeling that we're not doing it right, that we're not doing what we should be doing, and that we're somehow less of a person because we didn't hold it all together. And we need to let that go. As hard as it is, we need to let that go and be imperfect. Be who we are and raw and emotional and drained and stressed and all of these things. Let it all out to God. Be with God in that desert and then see what God responds to us in our hearts about that. Maybe it's not about dwelling on what more we need to give up. Maybe we really have to fully process what we've already had to even be forced to give up. And then, in our time in the desert, how do we move forward? What are some of the things that maybe aren't important anymore? and we can leave behind, or things that we liked about this pandemic. I did like the fact that I knew more about what my son was learning in school, where before I would get a, "What did you learn today?" Nothing. Yeah, those panic emails came, but at least I knew what he was learning. I knew what he was doing, and got to sit through some of those online classes and learn more myself about where he was going. Maybe you thought that too about faith formation and learned something while you overheard a Zoom class that your child was on with their teachers. Not everything about the pandemic was necessarily bad. But I think what is bad is if we don't take the time to sit with Jesus about the things that are happening and reflect on how we want to be, how we want to process all this, how we want to be with God in our suffering, in our questions about the future, and just afford ourselves the time to think about it and meditate on it. And in that sense, we've all become a little bit monastic, right? Because we're, stuck home more than we would normally be, and we've had a lot of time. But maybe instead of scrolling on our phones or our devices, to really just be quiet. Think about what all this means. Think about where we want it to go. And build the church of our home, our domestic church with our family. Some people said to me over the past couple of weeks, we've got sacraments, we've got checklists, we've got, the church has got certain rules for things. And I think most of you know me by now that if there's a loophole or a way to make it flexible, I will. Because I'm right there with you, right? Some of this stuff, if we worship the checklist, man, we'll drive ourselves crazy. But yet there are certain things we have to do because that's the part that I don't control. I don't control how sacraments are done. But at the same time, as important as the sacraments are, I think we need to honestly look at our families and say, if making First Eucharist, or if my child trying to hurry up and do an online retreat and trying to do community service in a distance situation and trying to get all these forms done is causing more anxiety and stress to my family, maybe we need to pause. Maybe you need to make a decision to do confirmation next year, to do First Eucharist next year. There's no hard and fast rules, contrary to our Catholic culture belief, and many disappointed grandparents that I know are well meaning and we love you. But you don't have to make those sacraments at a certain time. There's no rule that says that if you don't make First Eucharist in second grade that you're kicked out of the church. You can make it when you're ready. In fact, as a director of faith formation, as someone who has dedicated my life to faith and teaching that in all levels of life, I will tell you that what is the most important thing is your child's relationship to God. And if they are stressed and full of anxiety and looking at the entire process like it's a chore that's going to break them, then it's time to wait. Because we don't want them to make that sacrament under those conditions because they will never want to come back. And we don't want the kids to think that because they didn't make, because they made confirmation and got it over with, then they won't want to come back. We're trying to build relationships. Sacraments are to build our relationship, to bring our kids and ourselves to meet God halfway in that grace. That's the goal. But if we do it at the cost of our sanity, and because we don't know that we're ready for it, or we have really big pressing issues in our life, people that are sick, job losses, all of those things I mentioned earlier, that takes precedence. And please don't feel that you can't have that conversation with me. Please do have that conversation with me. Nobody's going to be more understanding than me because I'm right there. I get it and I understand it. But the trade off for me is I will never forgive myself if your family gets so stressed out trying to achieve those checklists that they get so stressed out that they never want to come back. And in that sense, it's not worth it. We don't want to do that. Sacraments are what build our relationship. We don't want it to be why it makes us not want to ever do it again, right? Or ever go into a church again. I know that you're all, um, in unique situations, and no one situation is exactly like the next because I have heard from enough people, even over the past year, even more so in the last 2 weeks, you are all dealing with really heavy stuff, really heavy stuff. And God is present in that heavy stuff. And your kids are learning just as much watching you make the decisions you're making every day and how you're handling it and how you're bringing your faith to those decisions, even if they're decisions about how we get the next meal or how we're going to treat online learning. They're learning from you way more than they're learning from us. If you ask me about my faith upbringing and how I even got into ministry and knew at the age of 14 that I was going to be doing something in ministry and spent all of my life trying to figure it out, what inspired me was watching how faith was brought into every decision my family made. My mother and my grandmother. My grandmother read that Bible. Both of my grandmothers read that Bible every night. Every memory I have is at some point, some form or fashion, they were sitting in a chair reading the Bible. Or that my mother would make, different banners for the church or offer to bring in baked goods or arrange rides for us. I mean, I've said that in past reflections before. Or my dad who would, catch extra fish or grew extra vegetables on our farm and unbeknownst to us would gift them to people that were less fortunate. Those are the things that spoke so much of how God was important to them that God became that important to me. And yes, I had wonderful faith formation teachers and I went to church, but those examples from my family are what are at the core of my vocation in life and what I chose to do with my life and the decisions I've made therein. So if you're ever doubting that you're doing a good job, that, not reading chapter 12 is going to change the life of your child for faith formation, I'm here to tell you that if it's not helping, don't do it. Do what works for you. God is in everything in our lives. And if you need that permission from me to hit the pause button, and it doesn't mean I don't want you back, I do, but come back when it works, when it makes sense, when you're not looking at faith like it's a burden or that your children are feeling burdened from it. That's not the goal that we want for your kids or your family. And I'm going to add that you should give yourselves far more credit than you give yourselves because you are doing the best you can do. You don't have to fit every check mark on the list. You don't have to be at every single lesson that we have. You don't have to watch every single video that I create. But if the ones you're watching are helping, then by all means do so. If the things that we're producing aren't helping, then don't. Everybody's growing at a different pace, doing different things. I have 250 families, between 250 to 270, that are directly or indirectly involved in faith formation on some level or fashion. And so many newsletters go out each week. And there's not a one of you that has the same situation as the other. And so I just want you to feel that you can be honest with me, have that conversation with me. I'm here to support you wherever you're at. And if we're not doing what needs to happen for your family, then we're still rooting for you, still praying for you. And when you're ready for what we're offering, come back for what we're offering. I just don't want you to feel trapped or in any way feeling that you're not good enough because you couldn't juggle it all, because none of us can juggle it all. There's lots of things I've had to drop from my plate because I just can't carry it all. And we should. And we prioritize what those things are. It's okay. So, I'm not trying to drive everybody away from faith formation, but with all the stress that I've been seeing and all of the comments that I've been hearing, I just want to give you the opportunity to think about that, and more so to think about Lent as looking at what you've already been going through, acknowledging the losses and grieving the grief that we need to grieve, but also to be with Jesus in those moments and be in that relationship with Him. Because that means so much more than trying to just get through page 14 because that's what's on the list to do and have your heart not be in it. Okay? So that's my message. I hope that you hear what I'm trying to say, and that it doesn't make anything any worse, but have a conversation with me if you need any help or support in figuring out what the next move is for your family, because this is what we're here to do, is help each other out, whatever way that looks. So have a wonderful Lent. Enjoy your time with each other. Continue doing what you're doing, the best ability you have, and we'll keep praying, because here's one thing that is for sure. Easter is coming. Resurrection is coming. No matter how long we've been in the desert, we know that that much is true. Have a great week, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon. God bless.